It's clearly the worst piece of legislation.
In modern history?
In modern history. I think you got to go back to the Fugitive Slave Act, perhaps.
Oh, my God.
To find something worse. The utterly misnamed One Big Beautiful Bill. I'm up to here with the mainstream media.
Really?
They are so complicit with Trump. Why do they keep calling it that?
Because that's the name of the bill.
That's the name of the bill that Trump forced on them. And the one good thing the Senate did, apparently, is eliminated that name.
Oh, did they?
Yes. And there's no reason for the media to constantly repeat that name. There are so many better names for it. Inhumane monstrosity. Donald Trump's folly. This is a bill that at every level is a disaster for the country. Yeah, they throw in a little bit of chump change for the middle class, a bit of savings on Social Security, a little bit of increase on what you can deduct, no tax on tips. That's a minuscule part of this bill. Where is the enormous hole in the budget coming from? Is it coming from the middle class and the poor? Of course not. It's coming from, as always, the very wealthy, the very rich, the big income earners. That's where the vast majority of the tax cuts are coming. But they don't want you to believe this, right? Trump says, don't believe what you see and hear. Don't believe when the Congressional Budget Office tells you this is going to blow a $3.3 trillion, not billion-dollar hole in the deficit. It's not going to blow a hole in the deficit at all, the Republicans tell us. Do you know why they're saying that, Sam?
No idea.
It's a total fabrication. They're saying you can't count the deficit increasing effects, the huge hole in the deficit that the tax cuts are going to produce, because they were adopted in the first Trump term. Even though they would expire, even without this bill, you can't count them. Even though it's real, it's actually going to put a $3.3 trillion at least in the deficit. They want you not to believe what you see, not to believe what you hear, but only believe what they can fabricate. We have reached the level here. And I'm not prone to hyperbole. We are coming close to George Orwell's double think, right? Where war is peace, hate is love, famine is plenty, deficit increases are actually decreases. It's insane, and I don't think the American people are falling for it. There's this old saying, you can fool some of the people all the time, you can fool all the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. Put up this poll, Sam.
Yes, sir. Right away, sir.
This is astonishing.
Astonishing.
We have never seen anything like this.
Never?
Never, for such a major, highly publicized, highly pumped initiative by a president of the United States and his party. And this is consistent with other polls that have been taken very recently. This shows a 26-point deficit in support. Other polls have shown as high as a 29-point deficit. We're talking 2-1, right?
Yeah.
The American people rejecting this. And the only reason it's even this high is support from the MAGA crowd. If you look at Democrats and independents, or even just independents, the critical swing people, it is even worse. Now, why is this so bad? There's an old saying, let me count the ways. I can't get into every single point, but we've already noted at least a $3.3 trillion hole in the deficit over the next decade. But as economists have pointed out, it's actually much, much worse than that. Do you know why, Sam?
Tell me.
Because it includes an enormous structural hole in the deficit. In other words, what's going to happen when you increase the deficit by trillions of dollars? It's got to be financed, right?
I don't know.
Yes, and how is it financed?
I don't know.
By Treasury bills. And this poses a real issue of whether Treasury bills can hold their value, whether we are risking default. And a lot of these bills are held by foreigners and foreign adversaries, which puts us at an enormous risk. And it also will increase the non-useful, non-substantive part of the federal budget, which is debt service, which is becoming the largest component of the federal budget. And if you increase the debt servicing, that means you have less money for programs that actually help the American people. But on top of the huge deficit, that structural deficit, that's going to be much worse than just $3.3 trillion, they've actually have budget increases in this bill that's supposed to be saving us money. And you know where the budget increases mostly are going?
Just tell me.
You can only imagine. To Trump's border wall, which is another policy the American people have totally rejected, and his deportation efforts. We're talking $150 billion being devoted to a program that doesn't help anyone in America. It only hurts us because these undocumented immigrants, and almost all of them are not criminals, contrary to what Trump told you. I gave the statistics in the last show. 72% with 0 criminal convictions, and the vast majority of the others with minor traffic violations or the like. So he's giving all this money to something that's only going to hurt us because, you know, these workers are the mainstay of their agricultural industry, the construction industry, the hospitality, the personal service. And for one brief, shining moment of glory, Trump understood this, right, Sam? And he said, oh, I'm not going to, deport people from all these businesses. That lasted, a day or two? And now he's back deporting people who are supporting our economy, paying taxes, and in so doing, blowing even a bigger hole in our deficit. And, and the Republican Party has for decades claimed to be the party of fiscal responsibility, that are totally devoted to balanced budgets and reducing the deficit. Here's the 2016 Republican platform, the platform that guess who ran on, Sam?
Tell me.
Donald Trump.
You're asking me way too many questions.
All right. The Republican path to fiscal sanity begins with a constitutional requirement for a federal balanced budget. We will fight for a balanced budget, and we will fight to prevent deficits from mounting to become maybe a government default. This is the official platform of the Republican Party. The Heritage Foundation, the leading conservative think tank, has said as one of the core principles of conservatism is that the federal deficit and debt must not place financial burdens on future generations. Tax policies should raise the revenue necessary to fund appropriate functions of government. But let's not stop here. When Donald Trump campaigned for the first time, what did he say? We owe $19 trillion as a country, and we're going to knock it down, and we're going to bring it down big league. We're going to bring it down quickly. We're going to stop our deficits. We're going to stop our deficits, and we're going to do it very quickly. They understand the pernicious effects on deficits. They claim that controlling deficits is one of the reasons you should support conservatives and Republicans. Unlike those profligate spending Democrats, that's one of our core principles. But when it comes to supporting their rich donors and their rich friends, which are the overwhelming beneficiaries of this inhumane monstrosity bill, then the principles just go out the window. You know, you've heard me say this so many times. You can explain American politics in one sentence. Democrats have no spine, Republicans have no principles, and they've absolutely proven it beyond not just any doubt, any reasonable doubt, that they have no principles when it comes to supporting their rich friends and their rich donors. Their own professed core commitment to cutting deficits and balancing budgets go right out the window or right into the shredder. Now, the other horrific part of this is, again, according to independent estimates, that anywhere from 12 million to 15 million needy Americans, not the rich, of course, that's not who's on Medicaid, will lose their Medicaid coverage or not be able to obtain their Medicaid coverage. And, you know, this is how they operate. You know, they operate by obfuscation, obstruction, delay, defection. They don't tell you openly what they're doing. And they say, oh, we're not cutting Medicaid. We're just cutting waste and fraud. Of course, they didn't identify the waste and fraud that this bill cuts. But we're just making sure that able-bodied people should not get Medicaid unless they work. We've got to make them work, and we've got to tighten up and make much more stringent the eligibility requirements. If you want to see the hypocrisy of this, I saw it just this afternoon. This very able-bodied, very articulate Republican congressman gets on, Sam, and what does he say? No able-bodied person should have their health care insurance funded by the taxpayers. I'm not going to ask you this because I know you know it. This guy and every other able-bodied member of Congress gets an insurance policy vastly better than what you get on Medicaid, which is very minimal, and we all know who pays for it. The taxpayers. So the poor persons who really depend upon this, you know, oh, they shouldn't get insurance paid for by the government. But all of us folks in the Congress, all of us, you know, a lot of them are millionaires, some are billionaires. We got to have insurance paid for by the taxpayers. And here's the problem. That's why every independent analysis says you're going to lose. People are going to 12 to 15 million people are going to lose their Medicaid or not get it because these work requirements are impossible. They have incredibly difficult paperwork requirements. They're very difficult to enforce, and they've also created all kinds of paperwork requirements that are going to throw people off Medicaid and make it very difficult for new people to get on. And, you know, this other fabrication is, oh, you know, if we get people to work, we're going to increase employment. You know, we're going to have productivity. Well, again, this is a fabrication. There's a Congressional Budget Office, and as much as Trump wants to attack them, they're bipartisan, independent. They found that Medicaid work requirements result in coverage losses with no change in employment or hours worked. Instead of promoting employment, these requirements often lead to coverage losses due to administrative barriers. Many individuals struggle to navigate these bureaucratic hurdles, leading to accidental loss of coverage due to missed deadlines or incomplete paperwork. A study in Arkansas found that thousands quickly lost Medicaid coverage due to the implementation of work requirements that did nothing to improve employment or hours worked. And who gets harmed? People with disabilities, older adults who may have retired and, really can't get a job, and of course the poorest of the poor, while the wealthy make out like bandits in this bill. And this bill isn't, also attacks food stamps. Certainly people are going to lose their medical insurance, which is, again, going to reverberate on the economy in a negative way because they're not going to get preventive care because they can't afford it, which means they're more likely to get sick or not treat an injury. And that means there's going to be lost work, lost productivity in the economy, lost taxpayer dollars. And where are they going to seek care when it finally gets to the point where they have to? Emergency rooms, the most expensive, least efficient form of care. And you know what? They may find the emergency room in their hospitals are shuttered, particularly if they live in rural areas where, which is the base of the Trump constituency. Because, as I said, you've got to understand all the reverberating effects of this inhumane monstrosity of Trump's folly. What happens when you cut Medicaid? You reduce a critical source of revenue for hospitals, particularly rural hospitals, which are already financially strapped and in danger of either reducing services or shutting down entirely. And so this is going to make it ever more difficult, particularly for people in rural areas, to be able to get care from their hospitals. It's clearly the worst piece of legislation.
In modern history?
In modern history. I think you got to go back to the Fugitive Slave Act, perhaps.
Oh, my God.
To find something worse. Maybe, and I don't think it's as bad, the Taft-Hartley Act that kind of scuttled labor rights after Republicans took over the Congress in 1946. But in terms of the breadth of its negative implications for our country and our people, this is the worst.